Good evening. Thank you very much for tuning in to this station.
Good evening.
You're watching Channel 23, Educational Television in scenic downtown Woodstock, New York. And then later on, you'll be watching this from YouTube. And the name of this show is Let's Live with Thurman Greco. And we have a first-time guest here this evening. I have known Carol Galione for many, many years, but this is the first time that I have been able to get her onto our show. So we're very happy. And Carol, can you start off by telling us what is it that you bring to this show this evening?
Well, I brought my vintage clothing, which is something that I've been passionate about since I was, I think, 15 years old.
Wow.
I used to ride my bike to the nearest thrift store and go hunting through, and I could find all kinds of treasures, of course, then for like a quarter. And I would literally buy baby clothes and put them away, thinking someday I would dress my baby in them. But I do have a few things. I don't know if I brought them tonight that I've had for literally that long. Well, maybe this necklace that I'm wearing is from high school, so I'll take that off and show it. But yeah, I came to talk about that, and then maybe a little bit about how we intersect, and in my old career that I'm sort of semi-retired from, but which is human services, and my new career, which is real estate.
Well, I'm very excited about all of your careers because, first of all, I find that vintage clothing is very artistic, and it's also very special. You get attached to these things.
Yeah. Everything has a story, and I'm very interested in the story. I always try to get it and pass it on when I sell the item. And I also, another reason I feel very good about selling vintage is that it's recycling, which is also something I'm passionate about. Why go out and buy new things when there's perfectly good old things that are just, waiting to be adopted?
They're much better. They're much better, actually. And the fabrics are very interesting.
Yeah. Everything is really good quality usually when you get older.
How do you attach to the stories? How do you find the stories?
Well, if I'm, digging through the Salvation Army, I can't really do that. But often, because people know that I sell vintage, they'll say, I have all this stuff that was my Aunt Tilly's or my friend who was a businessman and he's now retired and doesn't need these dressy clothes, and everybody's got a box in the attic with stuff. And I usually, as I say, I try to collect the story. And I could tell you, this is actually, if I hold it up, this is actually a men's sweater. It's probably vintage 70s, obviously vintage 70s, and it's got this great organically grown cotton tag in it, and but it was this very sort of dapper man who by day probably had to wear suits to work, and then he's older, and he had all of these kind of funky 70s things. And I also got a bunch of dress vests from him, beautiful silk vests, and he was a patron of the arts, and he had all these great opera scarves, like beautiful silk scarves and things. And I also got a bunch of funny, like patterned sweaters from probably the 80s from him as well. So that's just one story. And yeah, I mean, some of these things that I brought with me tonight, I did just find in one of my many thrift store haunts. But yeah, if it has a story, I'll be sure to tell you.
Do the stories ever present themselves to you?
You mean, do I find out like after the fact?
No, I'm just wondering, do they just reveal themselves?
Sometimes, as I said, sometimes if I know or have some connection to where they came from. Other times, I kind of just use my imagination about who they might have belonged to. So, but yeah.
So there is a story there, and you find it.
Yeah, I
That's
try.
wonderful.
I do my best because it does make it more interesting, and people like to hear. It's not crocodile, but it is leather. It's just embossed leather, so it's embossed with this crocodile, and it's Koblenz, and it's from the 50s, and again, it was this very elegant woman who happens to be my neighbor who had an office job in the city and, would wear a suit and high heels every day to work and have a pocketbook to match. So I just love that era. There's, as you say, a lot of romance and interest.
Well, and also, do people seek you out to give you things?
Yeah, I've always worn vintage as well, and so people, say, oh, I have this old suit, or I've got this great coat and nobody's wearing it. It looks like you'd appreciate it. So that's how I end up with a lot of things.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah. And, the scenario where you're looking for vintage in the Salvation Army is actually becoming fewer, and you can't really find things there anymore because they usually get picked before the stuff even hits the floor. They're vintage, wholesalers who go and they get first dibs. So a lot of it is gone. So if you do happen to find something, it's really good luck. And this vest that I'm wearing, which is not fur, it's fake, is if I take it off, I'm going to fade into the background, but I want to take it off because the label is so great. It's Betsy Johnson, who I adore, and I used to wear a lot of her clothes in the 90s, and this is probably 90s or early 2000, and I found it at the New Pulse Salvation Army, and it was a day that it was like the half price color, which is also, I'll challenge myself sometimes to only buy things that are like the half price color or on sale, and so this was it was a good find.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many days a week do you find yourself in these places?
It depends. As you saw, I did the Woodstock Flea Market this summer, and I've also done the High Falls Flea Market, and I've gone to the city and done Green Flea. So in the summer months, I probably do a bit more shopping, and then I taper it off towards the fall because I don't want to have to store it all. But I end up putting some boxes away for the winter, and then I have to list them online, and at some point I'll give you address. I'll tell people how they can find stuff online. And then, of course, in the spring I'll be back at the Woodstock Flea Market, which is, as you know, a very special place to be, and there's such a sense of community, and it's like a family. I mean, that's what I love about it.
Well, it is a very special place to be.
Yeah.
And it's also a very interesting place to be because there are a lot of vendors there, and none of them are coming up and saying, gee, I'd like to be on your show. You have to kind of seek them out.
Really?
And you would think that that people just understanding the process would say, hey, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah. I mean, I lived in this community for many years, and I know about the station, and I didn't know about your show, so that's great. But so of course I wanted to kind of support it. But I think a lot of people don't get, the cable TV station and I think a lot of people just don't get the concept and that it's community TV. And so.
Well, that's extremely important, but also the YouTube situation is, I didn't get the YouTube thing for a long time. I started off probably 15 or 20 years ago putting an occasional show on. And it was such a bore, and I didn't know how to do it. It was a big mess. And I am now realizing that once you've been on YouTube and you've got 3 or so shows, you're going to get a following.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
Yeah, people like you, and then that's it.
Well, or even if they don't know you, suddenly it's like, hey, this is vintage clothing, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so there is a networking opportunity that we have all been overlooking.
Absolutely. But I don't think everyone's quite as creative and brave as you are. I do think it takes a lot of courage, so I have to give you kudos.
Well, when I first started, I would go up and introduce myself and tell them, here it is, and here's a whole bunch of shows, and that you can look at it, blah, blah, blah. And if they looked like they were going to just melt into the earth, I would sort of scold them. I would say, look at this. I'm giving you this free, and nobody's going to make any money out of this at all. How could you pass this? I kind of scold them.
Yeah.
And now I really don't. Now, if they don't get it,
it's true.
and because people have begun to come to me now.
Yeah, they either need to, know or understand, or, maybe someone will tell them about it, like me. And then they'll go, oh, I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, now you've got all this vintage clothing, but you've got something else going too.
Oh, yeah. So I was a program manager. I worked for many nonprofits. I've done it for almost 30 years. I started out when my kids were, I don't know if this was intentional, but this is how it worked out. When my kids were little, I started working for agencies that pertain to child development and young children, or parents of young children. I actually was the director of a parent-child center in Rockland. That was a model that became, now it's actually a part of each of public schools. Ours was called just the Rockland Parent-Child Center, but now each public school has a family center where parents can connect and on behalf of their children and learn, and also feel some ownership and feel comfortable in their child's school. After that, I taught pregnant and parenting teenagers. I worked in a self-contained classroom where teenagers could come who were pregnant and keep finishing their high school degree and have their babies and come right back and not miss a beat. I worked for the YWCA also with pregnant and parenting teenagers, helping them achieve their goals and helping them with resources so they can help themselves, basically, which is really what I've done in every agency I've worked for, because then I worked for Rupco for many years with people who were either chronically homeless or had developmental or physical disabilities. So they're all about affordable housing, and I help people attain the resources they needed to stay successfully housed. Sometimes it's just getting a doctor's appointment. Sometimes it's just being able to take your trash to the dump. Sometimes it's filling out job applications and job searches or needing extra financial help. So that I was there for quite a long time. I think we intersected when I worked there. And then I worked with a lot of seniors there as well, because we had senior housing. And then for the end of my career in human services, I had moved back home to Rockland, where I'm from, and I was the volunteer coordinator for hospice, for United Hospice in Rockland. And there I taught volunteers how to interact with people who were on hospice, and I coordinated their visits. And so starting with preschool and ending with hospice. And like I said, I don't know if it was intentional, but it worked out that way, and it was really good. And then over the pandemic, I decided to go back to, I took an online class to achieve my real estate license, my real estate salesperson license. And I had one many years ago, and way back in the 90s, I think when my kids were for a little bit of a stint, I thought if I had, I needed a flexible schedule, and that's why I did it. But I had let it lapse, and over COVID, I decided I would take this course, and I did, and I just hung on for it for a while. I didn't do anything with it until probably this autumn. I joined an agency. I'm with Keller Williams North, which is in Kingston, New York, and there was such an incredible boom, during COVID. Our county really swelled. I think it grew I heard something like 25%. I kind of missed that boom, but almost intentionally. I think it would have been a little crazy for me. So now I'm working with a few young families that are looking for forever homes in Ulster County. And I have a few clients, and I've listed a couple of houses for friends and neighbors. But I really, in 2019, my husband and I had this little tiny nest egg, and we knew we would just fritter it away if we didn't invest in something. And we had tried buying a house before, and at that time it was really a seller's market, and we just kept getting outbid or something. And we were living in Rockland at the time and couldn't afford anything there, so we were looking in Orange, and then we were getting outbid. And then we had lived in Ulster before, and we knew we loved it, and we only moved away for work for a while. And I said to my husband, let's just buy a house in Ulster. We had lived in Rosendale. We love that community. I said, we could rent it out, and we could move there whenever we're ready, when we retire or something. So that's what we did. But we actually found a multi-residence property. It had a house and a barn with an apartment, and we did rent out the house, and we were renovating the barn, and with the intention of coming up on the weekends. But when we were finished, we loved it so much, we were just we just want to be here all the time. So I think it was 2018, that we moved. We just moved up lock, stock, and barrel. And my husband has to do a little driving to go to the city a couple of days a week. So, and during the pandemic, I don't know what we would have done without our home. And so I really did get this license with the goal towards helping people know that it is achievable. You can, even if you don't have a lot of money for a down payment, there's great programs out there. I know right now that RUPCO has grant money for down payments. I know that there's you have to make a certain amount of money. So there's a few, requirements, eligibility requirements, but it's out there. And there are banks that also, or credit unions, I think, that offer first home buyers classes. And people always say to me, well, I used to own a house like 5 years ago, or I lost it or something. Well, first time home buyers means you have to have not owned a house in 2 years. I'm pretty sure it's still the same. So people don't realize. And we got something called an FHA mortgage when we got it, but when we bought our house, we were so lucky. We had A seller, it's a lengthier process and more hoops to jump through. But we had a seller that was so lovely and said, I'll wait. And she just waited for us to get, it took a long time that we did it.
To have had a home 5 years ago, that's another world. That's not even reality now.
Yeah.
I mean, the market has changed so much.
Yeah.
That even if they didn't qualify as first-time buyers, the experience is completely different now.
It is. It's different than just the 5 years ago, even that we purchased our home. However, it's, the longer you wait, actually things are constantly changing. That's never going to be different. Things are going to be changing. We both know that as boutiques. Things always change. So I think that's not a reason to get stuck. I think people should just try, and there's certainly, it was difficult for a long time because so many people, it's such a desirable area and so many people wanted to be here and had homes to sell and then cash to buy houses, and it's crazy, but that's calming down. Unfortunately, interest rates are climbing, but at the same time, house prices are dropping every day. So it's beginning to level out again, and hopefully, I'm hopeful that the interest rates will drop again. But I do see, price reductions in homes quite a bit lately.
Well, houses costing a certain amount of money a year ago or 2 years ago, and then today they are a completely different amount. I mean, it's just not, you can't.
Yeah.
You cannot carry the reality of this home over to this year.
You can't, because it's just about what people are willing to pay.
Yes.
And it's pretty crazy. I mean, there's some people that are, living here, how beautiful it is and how valuable it is. And a lot of people are realizing that. And there are people who are willing to pay a pretty crazy amount of money, I think. But, as I said, I think that's calming down a bit. And I think a lot of people did a lot of shifting around, and a lot of them are kind of where they're going to be for a while, I think.
Do you think so?
I kind of do. I think with the onset of remote work, the whole remote work from home phenomenon, I think people are going to realize more and more that they could literally live anywhere in the country and, have their job, wherever it is, if they're able to work remotely. So that's actually, I see it as a good thing. It's people can move places that are more affordable. People can move places that hold a special attraction for them, whether they're farmers or hikers or skiers or, whatever. And I think I see it sort of really opening up the country. Maybe some places that are under populated and need people. There are actually some places like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a couple of secrets here that we don't?
I would have to do a little research, but I have heard of some little towns, especially in the Midwest, and that they don't have enough people to fill jobs and things. So, it's I think that. You got to do a little digging, and it's more than just those 10 best places for this or that list. You just got to do a little research.
Yeah, you have to work at it.
Yeah.
And what I don't see? I don't see neighborhoods being built.
Yeah.
I come from a history where. Because I grew up in the South, there would be somebody, some real estate agent, some developer would go out and buy a bunch of acres, and then they would put in some streets and some houses and a school or a church, and they would call it something, and people would move in.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not happening.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm not sure why, but I think in the Northeast, it's because there's not a lot of land. I mean,
Right.
we're pretty, it's pretty dense already. But it's true. I mean, I lived in a neighborhood like that. I mean, the houses were 1920s houses, but there were blocks, and there was a neighborhood school and a library, and
Right.
yeah. I think that I would love to see. I don't know a lot about city planning or about planning, but I'd like to see more of that. But as I say, I think it's because so much is already developed.
Well, and we're full.
Yeah.
This area, as far as I'm concerned, is full.
Yeah, it is. But that, what you were saying about, it's so different, a house, the value, whatever, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and now, part of that you're talking about is part of the value, and that it depends on where you're coming from. I mean, if you're coming from New York City, part of the value and that is the charm of Woodstock is, being able to walk to the library or the community center, or putting your kid in a town camp, or, not locking your door, or whatever. That's part of what you're buying, I think.
Well, I do know that the pandemic changed us all.
It did. And I literally, for a young couple that I'm working with, contacted RUPCO as recent as last week, and they do have some grant money right now. So, you have to do a home buyer education, and I was talking to my own banker last week about an equity loan, and she was telling me that she got a grant from RUPCO, and it's really, I think that it's possible, and people, they just, it's like your show, they don't know about it,
Right.
or they're intimidated because,
Right.
or they think they can't do it, and I think that, I hope that people I hope that people reach out, because I totally am willing to work with someone. I'm not expecting to turn around, get a new client and sell them a house the next month. It takes a lot of nurturing and a lot of time. You kind of hold a person's hand, sometimes for years, and then, until they're ready or able.
My oldest daughter spent 3 years looking for her house. Excuse me. She bought herself a home several months ago, and she had spent 3 years looking for that house.
Yeah.
And it was just an amazing venture. It was a journey.
Yeah. Well, the last 2 years especially have been really challenging for anyone looking to buy, just in terms of there being stock, and in terms of, again, the value being kind of inflated and going up, and so it's been challenging, and I think things are shifting a little, definitely.
You think it's getting easier?
I think it's getting easier, and I think that I think it's hard. I think for a lot of people, that whole the down payment thing is the most intimidating part. And for some people, it's a credit rating, and that's why I'm saying it takes years of nurturing, because so you could start just working on that, and by the time it's repaired, and maybe you can apply for a grant. I think that it's just as a segue. It's also ties into recycling vintage or just recycling clothing, because it's also a way to economize. It things just they don't cost as much, and sometimes you can find, as you said, really good quality things, and sometimes you can find really expensive labels, but for less.
Well, you know, when you buy a house, or whether you buy a garment, you have to look for something that's going to work for you, and you have to look for something that's going to have value for you. Mm-hmm. And everybody sees value in a different way.
Yeah, yeah.
You
true.
know?
Yeah.
And I see people buying homes, and I'm amazed. I'm amazed
Me
at
too.
what they're buying. But they're, you know, hey, you know, then you get it and you paint it and you fix it up and you do all these things.
Yep.
And that's part of your journey.
Absolutely, yeah. You make it your own.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, we also live in this age where there's all of these, you know, these DIY or home renovation shows. And I confess that during the pandemic, I was really addicted to some of them. But they do these fabulous and costly renovations. And, you know, of course, they make it so desirable.
Yes.
But you don't have to do that. I mean, paint doesn't cost a lot. And you can just start by making one room, you know, comfortable and beautiful, and just by using some paint and some fabric. And I'm a huge fan of the Restore, of the Habitat for Humanity Restore. And I buy paint there. I bought windows there that we put in the front of our barn. So that's a great resource that we have. So, and again, in keeping with recycling.
Well, you know, the Habitat for Humanity Restore, it was here for like a year before people began to accept it even.
Yeah. Now, I mean, yeah, for a long time, I think, or, you know, when people discovered it, it was just people coming from the city, you know, driving by and pulling in and buying antiques. But, I mean, I shopped there. We had a wedding at a friend's house, and I went there and bought plates, because it was less expensive to buy plates and silverware and glassware than to rent it. It was cheaper than renting it. So we had 85 guests. I bought 85 mismatched plates. I got a bunch of silverware, and I got beautiful stemware. Just didn't happen to match, but it was great. And after our wedding, I know I lent it to so many people. It's gone out all over the county, I think. And then, you know, we've had yard sales. But it was so great, rather than buying paper plates and throwing them out. And because, you know, I think we ended. You okay?
Yeah.
I think we ended up just, you know, hosing it off and putting it in crates and sticking it away afterwards. But
Well, have you ever thought about taking it back? Returning the dishes?
I have, actually. And it's funny, I'm going to pull some of these things out, but I've gone to thrift stores and seen some of my things. Because often, you know, stuff will just get down to things that I can't sell, or it's not vintage, so I don't, you know, I might put it out at a yard sale, but I'm not going to bring it to my vintage sales. And then at the end of the yard sales, my rule is always never to bring it back into the house. So I box it up and I'll bring it to, you know, one of the church thrift stores, or the Tibetan Center, or you know, maybe the Salvation Army. So,
how is the Tibetan Center working for you?
you know, I stopped there for the first time in a long time. When was it? Not too over the summer. I stopped there, and I hadn't been there for a very long time. I hadn't been to the new location, actually. It was much better organized, I have to say that.
So you were able to find things.
Yeah, it wasn't, you know, things weren't quite as piled up as they were at their other location.
Oh, Those poor things, they were just completely,
And people just kept dumping things on them, so I know it was hard, and, until they got their staff worked out, it was hard.
well, and if they weren't there for the moment, they were looking in the other direction. Somebody just came in and got rid of it really quick. I mean, it was, they had there
Yeah.
was no
Yeah,
hope,
yeah.
Yeah,
it was hard.
Yeah. So you're still looking for the vintage clothing too.
Again, this is my passion. This is something that I do because I love it. I feel so it gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling because I get very nostalgic, and it's a way of kind of bringing back a time in your life. And I'll show you some things. For instance, each year I'll buy a dress for myself for my birthday, which is coming up. And so this is kind of my ilk. This is 1974. It's the African beads on hammered brass. I got it at a little arts and crafts store in my town that I grew up in. But I've been
It's a beautiful piece.
I've been literally wearing it since 1974, and I love it. And every time I put it on, I feel I get nostalgic for the high school and my little town and walking to school and going to art museums and whatever. I really kind of evokes a time for me. And so I wanted a dress. I really like 40s and 50s because 40s and 50s dresses are very well fitted, and I'm getting older, my body has changed a great deal, but they're somehow, it's so flattering the way things are, whether it's bias cut or whether it's got a little bodice or something. But when I was going to school in the 70s, we had something called a maxi dress. Do you remember?
Oh, yes.
So this is actually the same label as this sweater. It's arpege. Is it arpege? I always forget. It is.
Oh, this is beautiful. Look at this.
Isn't that amazing? So this is, it's on the label says, and the labels are so much fun. This is called Young Innocent by I should put on my glasses. Do you see that?
Yeah, by Arepa.
Arepa. That's what I mean. Arepa. And it's got
That's
this great
beautiful.
smocking that was so in style in the 70s, right? And I just found this on a site that I actually sell on called Poshmark. And again, at the end, I'll give you how to
Well,
find
the thing about this is the fabric is lovely.
Isn't it
The
great?
quality is, and the workmanship is very,
Yeah, I mean,
very
look
nice.
at that. It's just amazing. I love it, and I love dresses that have smocking. So I got, again, this just evoked 1970s to me, and so I love it. And I was actually thinking about wearing it tonight, and then it was so freezing. But this is kind of an era that I adore, which is the 40s. I have a bunch of dresses. I don't know if it was a style. This has got accordion pleats. But I have a bunch of
this is
dresses that
luscious.
have these buttons that have the rhinestone in the middle. I have several that have the exact same buttons, and I've gotten them all different places.
And
so
look at this lovely
must have been a
fabric.
thing, yeah. And this is something I wore recently. I actually wore it to early. Of course, I need to take a few tucks in it. But I wore it to like a Thanksgiving thing, and I just put a sweater over it, and everybody loved
It's
it.
luscious.
Isn't it great? And then I have two daughters, and my daughters have kind of gotten the bug. Well, my older daughter especially. So she'll get things, and then eventually they'll come back to me. It used to be she would raid my closet, but now I'm kind of, I was raiding hers. Now she moved away, but she sends me things when she's not wearing them anymore. And this is, it's called Sharon's World, is the label. I just love the labels. by Sharon Rothfield. Styled
Oh,
for,
that's
styled for
lovely.
Sharon. So this is
And
the
look
kind
at
of,
the fabric.
So this
Oh,
is kind of
this
a
is
wrap
so
dress,
beautiful,
which
yes.
Diane von Furstenberg made very, very popular. It's just a wrap dress. And my daughter affectionately calls this the bacon dress. So she says, Mom, she'll see me on the, she'll say, you're wearing the bacon dress today, or you're,
But it's beautiful.
isn't it great? I love this dress. I wear it all the time. Then this is another 40s dress that I also wore recently.
Oh my
So
goodness,
this
look
has
at
got
that.
a side zipper, and it's
Oh,
so
how
flattering. I
luscious.
think it's like a wool crepe. There's a little kitty fur.
And look at the waist. Oh, this is
Isn't that great?
beautiful.
And look at the
You know
beading,
what?
all the beading.
This dress is lovely on.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it just drapes really nicely. It's got all of these panels, so it's just really nice. And you know, the other thing about these dresses is they're imperfect, which is something else I appreciate about them. Like this one, again, I need to take a few tacks in, but they're showing, some of them, they're showing their age, and you know, that's kind of just what we do, you know. So, and then,
Well, you know, I really like your taste because no, you're buying things and selling things that look nice on people.
they're like art, you know.
Yes.
It's not just like,
And they're
you don't-
comfortable
you
to
don't
wear.
see yourself coming and going.
Oh, that
So
is
this
luscious.
is this came from this same gentleman who's this. He actually lives in Boston. So he was this very trendy 1970s dude. And isn't that crazy? This is LeMay. It looks like, I think this was handmade.
Oh yeah, this is beautiful.
Yeah, you can see.
Look, he had someone make this.
Yep.
Oh wow, this is beautiful.
And I have one other, this person was really into vests, so I brought a bunch of vests. This is something that I am super passionate about. I try to find good women's slips whenever I can. This is one, they always have funny names too. This is one, it's Barbizon, of course, that's an old name.
Oh, and look at this. Oh,
It's a
look
nylon.
at this.
Yeah, the little
Isn't
accordion.
that luscious?
And I'll wear these like under, like that little light blue, sometimes they're kind of sheer, so I'll wear these. Or you could put them on under. Like,
Do you sew?
I do. I need to, over the winter, I plan on doing a bunch of sort of tacking and reinforcing on some of this stuff. And
No, but I mean, do you can
Oh,
you
do I
see
make
yourself
garments?
design? Yeah.
I actually don't, honestly. I kind of leave that to other people. This is another one of that gentleman's. This was a vest that actually his grandmother made. I
look
don't even
at
know why
that.
he got rid of this. Because
Isn't
why would you
that-
ever give away something that your grandmother made? But he must have had other things.
That is
Isn't
adorable.
that fabulous? Yeah, I'm not a great sewer, but I can mend things.
Now, do you ever
There's another one. I love that.
find yourself selling things to people who have costumes?
Yes, I mean, I used to a lot more. My husband's a musician and entertainer, so I'd love to dress people for the stage, but I haven't really run into that kind of patron lately. I did find someone recently who bought, at the end of the flea market, a sort of bulk, a lot of my stuff, who is going to have a space at the at the Newberry store in Sawbreeze. It's become a
Oh, they're going to finally do something with that.
they did it. It's beautiful. It's just gorgeous. And everyone has like a 10 by 10 space. And there's all kinds of interesting things there. This I just got at an auction, at an estate auction. These are beautiful little coral glass beads. And look, this is plastic, but feel it.
That's
Isn't
luscious.
that cool?
Yes, it is. No, it is.
It's just the coolest thing. It's like a piece of art.
It is.
Trying to think of what else. I have one more. Oh, I have this old, this is a real Greek cap, wool cap. And this is also from the 1970s. These were really popular for a while. Yeah. Oh, that's kind of fun.
You know, somebody wore this one.
Yes.
Somebody
yeah,
enjoyed
yeah.
it.
Well, yeah, that was well loved. That one, it looks like it was worn quite a bit. I might actually have to take it in and have it cleaned.
For me, if I can find something that someone had and enjoyed, it has more value.
I feel that way as well.
It's one thing to buy something gorgeous and it hangs in your closet and never goes anywhere, but it's another thing that you use.
Yeah. Check out this
Oh,
this collar.
look at the collar. Oh, look at that.
Cool. So
That is
yeah,
luscious.
and it's also why I pass things along when I don't wear them any longer. Like, I loved this. I don't love it as much anymore. I know you'll love it. I give things to my new daughter-in-law, I call her, and I know you'll love it, and that's why I pass it along.
No, this is beautiful
Isn't
fabric.
it great? It's fun.
And I love
It's
that
just a
color.
sample.
That color is just
Yeah,
gorgeous.
I do too. So, it's Sweetheart Vintage, but I also online use the name Earth2, the number 2, Carol. So both on Etsy and Poshmark, it's Earth to Carol. Actually, it might be different on Etsy. I think it is Sweetheart Vintage on Etsy and Earth to Carol on Poshmark. And it's just poshmark.com or etsy.com. And yeah, it's, unfortunately, I don't love the process of taking pictures and listing things online. I will do it over the winter because I need to earn a living. But, you know, I can't wait for the flea market to start again, because again, it's more of a connection. It's a nice way to connect with people who are buying.
Well, now,
who are
can
buying
you
your
put
stuff.
these items on Etsy in the winter?
Yep, I will do some. Like, I won't. It's a lengthy process to, like, you photograph everything, and then things are kind of irregular sizes, so you put the size, but you have to measure them and things like that, and then you have to ship it out when somebody buys it, which sort of adds to the cost. So I will do it out of duress, but I can't wait for the flea market to start again. And again, it's a nice way to connect with people who are.
I think it's interesting that you had a booth at the flea market, and you've had it for years, and I never knew it.
Well, I started at the Woodstock Flea Market in, I think maybe 1999 or 2000. And I did it probably for about 4 years, pretty much steadily. And then I stopped doing it. And then I moved away, and then I didn't do it for a long time. But when I started selling at the High Falls Flea Market, it was a little closer to my house. It was fun and I liked it, but I just said, I have this community, I kind of miss it. And so it's a little more of a schlep, but I decided I would go ahead and make the schlep to Woodstock.
Well, High Falls starts earlier in the season, doesn't it?
I think it does, yeah. And they were for a long time only on Sundays, but then last year they tried Saturday and Sunday, and I'm not sure if it really caught on, because it was always better on Sunday, I think, just because it's when people expected it to be there. So we'll see what happens this year.
Yeah. Well, I know that John Maurer said that they are not going to start it before Memorial Day this year.
Oh, really? Because
Yeah.
he was starting it was always the weekend after Mother's Day.
Yeah.
But, so after Memorial Day is sooner, right?
No.
May?
No.
Oh.
Memorial Day is the end
At the
of
end
May.
of May, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's unfortunate that They're
Well, it's getting to be,
actually, if they went longer, because a lot of people really like the fall months. So if they went beyond the end of October, if they started later and went later, that would be great.
when I first started having a booth there, it did go into November. And it went into November based on the weather. And now he just says no. And I can appreciate it. He's been doing this job for 50 years,
It's true.
time.
They are pretty, anchored by it, so it's probably
And
nice.
they are professional and polite and cordial to everyone.
Yeah.
And that's a toughie.
Yeah.
For 50 years, that's a toughie. I mean, I've never seen the man lose his temper or even speak negatively to anyone. And I'm thinking, for 50 years?
I have to say, I agree. And that can be tricky around here.
Well, and
people-
in the flea market, you've got so many different personalities.
Exactly.
And I started going over to Maria's to do the cards, and I am not doing it this year.
You're not.
This year I'm working. I am working on a book, and I have to get it finished.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to find you somewhere for a reading. But it's really well established, and people really love it. And you can find incredible things there. And the interesting thing about the vintage there's so often on a weekend, there's 5 or 6 or 7 or even 8 vintage vendors. And people say, well, doesn't your stuff kind of get diluted then? Isn't it hard? But it doesn't, because that's the other great thing about vintage is that there's no two things are the same. And when you just are looking for that one special thing or a few special items, I just know you either have it or you don't.
Right.
If somebody doesn't find it on my booth, they wander over to another one, great.
Right.
But, or vice versa. But I don't think it's not like that. And it's not a competitive spirit like that either. I love it. The vendors are all so friendly.
Well, it brings a certain amount of camaraderie. It really helps. The atmosphere is really nice.
Yeah, I was vending there in the early 2000s when there was 2 vendors that got married. I'm sure John will remember this, and they got married at the flea market.
Oh, wow.
I think it was it was like Halloween weekend, and it was right at the end of the flea market. Everybody just walked over and they got married right there, and then they had champagne. It was wonderful.
Oh, how cute. How totally cute. Well, how are you going to, what are your plans for your real estate this coming year?
Well,
Can you even plan?
Yes and no. So real estate is a very different game from when I had my license in the 90s and I sat in a beautiful Victorian house on a main street and people walked in or answered an ad in the New York Times and called in. You had desk time, and if you answered the phone, it was your client. It's not like that anymore. You're mining for leads, and you're doing it some with in your own sphere of influence, friends, family, but then if you are lucky enough to get a listing, many people call on that listing, and only obviously one person ends up buying it. So you hang on to the other people that called that didn't end up buying it and say, this house sold, but if you'd like, I can call you and let you know when there's things that are similar. And so that's one thing. So I have to generate, my goal for especially these kind of, hibernation months is to generate leads and, people, because I'm never going to be that person that just, cold calls people. That's just not my personality. But people are still moving. People are moving because they have to. If you're lucky enough to have a house that has, and you're in a high value area and you can trade down, now is a really good time to do it, because you could buy something smaller and more affordable and you could stick that money in the bank. And again, people are saying, well, the rate is up to like 7 now. It was 3 or 4, but housing prices, I mean, I see tens of hundreds of thousands of dollar price drops every day.
Well, when people talk about the percentage, what we were paying was so low, it was unreal.
Yeah. It was
that could not sustain itself.
No, it was very good for a while for buyers, but I think you're right. It couldn't. But I think again, the nature is that it's always going to go up and down.
Yes,
that's just the nature. It's going to go up and down.
Yeah.
What goes up, it's come down.
Yeah.
And I think that spring is traditionally a time when a lot of things come on the market. People put their house up for sale, and I think I think things are going to level off, and this spring the market is going to be a little bit more realistic, a little bit more attainable for middle class people, because for a while there wasn't a lot of stock in that middle range, and wealthy people were buying up those houses and using them for second homes. So, hopefully all of that craziness is calming down.
Do you find people are moving back?
Moving back to where they came, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard of that. I haven't heard much, but I did hear people talking about how the city became a little more affordable during the pandemic because so many people moved out. So maybe people would move back, after some price adjustments. But I haven't heard much of that. So again, once there, I think my next move is going to be, to another continent. So, like Italy or something. But
yes.
I don't. So, but as long as I'm here, and because of my kids, and I love where we are. I mean, it's so beautiful, and people are so amazing.
Well, I'm in an older category now, and I look around and oh my goodness, we have 2 minutes left. Listen, you have to spend the 2 minutes telling people how to get in touch with you.
Okay.
This is it.
So my real estate, again, my office is Keller Williams, Hudson Valley North. It's right in Uptown Kingston. And I'm just going to give my cell phone number. It's my business number, and it's 845-642-2116, and it's Carol Galione. And texting, if you text me first, and if I don't know you, just text me first and I'll answer the phone. And Poshmark is Earth, the number 2, Carol, and Etsy is Sweetheart Vintage. And I actually sold a bunch of stuff that were online, so this weekend I'm doing a lot of listing. So if you go to that site right now, you're not going to see a lot, but I'm going to be doing a lot of listing this weekend.
Soon.
That's my homework this weekend.
That's your homework this weekend. Well, it was lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
This was such a lovely visit. And I want to thank Ellen. Ellen does such a great job.
Ellen.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Ellen. And I'm hopeful that we can come back.
Yeah.
In a change of seasons, 4 or 5 months, things will be totally different. The clothes will be different. The interest rate will be different.
Exactly.
The housing market will be different. It's all going to be completely different.
Yeah. We'll see how things develop.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Ellen. Thank you very much, darling.